Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Since we last talked, the Browns were eliminated from the playoffs, lost in Pittsburgh, and Doug Dieken announced his retirement after the finale on Sunday. They will play the Bengals to wrap up the season with nothing on the line. Here to discuss a rough week for the Browns and their fans is Dave Chudowsky of Go, the WKYC Morning News. Hey, Chud.
Scott, good to talk to you under these circumstances, but I have breaking news before we get to anything else. I feel like it is my duty to let the audience know that you are listening to a Fantasy Bowl champion. It was a long ride, but I did pull it out and win the Fantasy Bowl. My league, I've been doing it 26 years, Scott. I started at 96 when the Browns left. I was like, what am I going to do? There's no Browns. So I started this fantasy league 26 years later. Just won my fourth title. So there's a lot of history in this league. There's a guy in the league that's won 7 times. There's just a ton of history, and it's exciting. So I'm pumped for myself. I'm going to have to give myself a pat on the back because no one else will.
There you go. Well, congrats, Chud.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I know you're into fantasy as well, and a lot of people out there are, and it's very popular. So that was cool. I also got to say, I texted you on Monday. What did I ask you?
I don't know. Oh, did I want to change my pick? Did I want to change my pick?
Did you want to change your pick?
Yep.
And you said no, and I didn't either. But you know what? Man, am I regretting that? Because just after watching that game, I'm like, why didn't we just change our pick? I mean, what led us to believe after they got knocked out of the playoffs, they were going to go into Pittsburgh and beat Big Ben on his final game? That's an error on my judgment for not switching that pick. But at the same time, I'm like, if I go and switch it, they'll probably win. But, we talked about that last week. We both predicted them to win. But once they were out of it, they showed us exactly who they were on that night. They just, I'm not saying they gave up, but they didn't put up a fight in that game.
Well, I'm gonna push back a little bit, Chud. Number one, I thought the defense played pretty well. I mean, bat average like 2 yards a throw, especially against the pass. Right, they got run on a little bit. And, they got within whatever it was late, so it's not like they stopped playing. They scored in a quarter, a touchdown at the end of the third quarter and then one in the fourth quarter. But I think it's like anything. When the offense is bad, then everything looks terrible, right? So even though they were down only 10-0 at halftime or 13-0, whatever it was, it felt so much worse because the offense couldn't do anything. And that's really been the story of the season, right? Is the offense just hasn't been good enough and exciting enough to engage everyone and to take advantage of what has been a pretty solid defensive performance for the last couple of months.
All right, I'll give you that. You've sold me 50%, and that's why we do this. I will take back a little bit of my comment. Maybe I'm just coming out frustrated. That said, part of why that happened, though, is our original reason for thinking they would win in the first place is that Steelers team is not that good.
Yeah.
And if that was the Big Ben of 10 years ago or another elite quarterback in the NFL, the defense probably would not have done as well, and they would have lost by more. But the fact that we thought that's what Big Ben and that offense would look like is why we thought they'd win the game in the first place.
No, I hear you. Yeah, you're right about that. And I'm not saying there was no letdown from being knocked out of the playoffs. I think that's only natural. So yeah, in Pittsburgh certainly had the emotion. They're still alive in the playoffs, even though it's a remote chance. You had the Ben factor. So it would have been wise to change our picks. I'm just saying that, they were in that game for as poorly as they played. They wound up being in that game probably longer than they should have been.
No, you're right. And there was a point when they did score that touchdown in Njoku. I guess there was a thought that, wow, could they come back and win this? So, I'll ride my comments back a little bit, but at the same point still, a disappointing way to go down on Monday Night Football. What are your thoughts? And I don't know how much you want to break down this game, how much it even matters, but a lot of national media and local media talking about the use of Nick Chubb and why Baker was passing so much. I just want your thoughts on that. I've heard some interesting stories, both ways. Like, why would you use Chubb so much in a game that really doesn't matter? But at the same point, why not take down your division rival on Monday Night Football and use the guy that should be able to beat him? I guess he's banged up, right? I guess just overall your thoughts on on the use of Chubb and why Baker's so much in the passing game.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion on a number of levels. Like, as far as, do you play Chubb even though, the game doesn't matter? Well, there's a whole bunch of teams playing games in this league that don't matter, right? I mean, more than half the league's not going to the playoffs, so everybody just doesn't get shut down. Now, Chubb is a valuable player. They signed him to a big contract. I get that element of it. I think the plan was to give him the ball more, and then he banged his ribs on that 32-yard carry in the first quarter. And then he needed some time off. And then they still rotate the Ernest Johnson in, which is a bigger argument. Should you just work Chubb more? The Browns have been consistent and adamant that that's not what they're going to do. They're going to rotate Nick Chubb because they think it's going to extend his career, keep him fresh in the fourth quarter, keep him fresh late in the season. I get that we're late in the season, but by then it didn't matter, right? They weren't going to the playoffs. So, that's one argument. Then you have, just from a game standpoint, should he have gotten the ball more? And it's hard to argue that he shouldn't have, because he's the best player. The other option is you have Baker Mayfield throwing the ball, and we know how much Baker has been struggling, right? And eventually you have right tackle James Hudson III gets dominated by TJ Watt, and that leads to Baker taking a bunch of sacks. So it's all a domino effect from, not running it. So I get it. I get that the Mannings are talking about it on the Manning cast, and the broadcasters, Louis Riddick and Brian Greasy, are talking about it on the normal ESPN broadcast. But I do think this is interesting because I was having a discussion with somebody. Like, if you go back and look, so the Browns first get the ball, they run Chubb, he loses 2 yards. Okay. Then they wind up picking up a first down on a pass, and then they throw it on first down, incomplete. So 1 out of 2 first downs, they run it. Next time they get the ball back, Chubb runs for 32 yards. Well, that's when he gets banged up. And then Ernest Johnson comes in and runs for a couple of yards. And then that drive winds up being sabotaged because Austin Hooper gets a false start after he already dropped 2 balls. Next time they get the ball back, Chubb runs for 4 yards on first down. Now, you can argue that they should have run it then on second down. Instead, Baker throws incomplete. He gets sacked on third down. They punt. The point is, and the next time they get the ball back, Chubb runs on first down for 1 yard. So it's a little bit false to say that they didn't hand the ball to Chubb, right? He got the ball sometimes. But I understand that when you look at it and you go, okay, at the end of the first half, Nick Chubb had 4 carries for 35 yards. Well, one of those is for 32. So the other 3 were for 3 yards. I get it, right? But he did get banged up a little bit. Ernest Johnson carried 4 times. Like, I get the big picture part of it, but as we've talked a million times on this, Chud, if you break it down, there's usually explanations for some things, right? Now, that's not an excuse for Kevin Stefanski. I think Nick Chubb should have gotten the ball more. You run it, you're facing the 32nd ranked run defense. But I understand the thought of, they were going to run it a little bit, throw it early, make the Steelers get out of what they were doing defensively, which was gearing up to stop Nick Chubb, and then we can run it later. And then you just never get the chance to run it later because you're losing the game.
Scott, overall, where are you at on the coaching staff right now? A lot of people are not happy about Kevin Stefanski and, how he's followed up his coach of the year here. What are your thoughts right now as we have 1 game left?
Yeah, I'm not getting that, Chubb. I got Chubb on my brain. I don't know. I don't get the backlash against Kevin Stefanski. I understand that he hasn't been as good this year, right? And it's his fault, or it's his responsibility that the team is 7-9. And it's his responsibility that the offense took a step back, especially the passing game. It's his system. He's the play caller. I get that. I'm not removing blame. What I don't understand is how, if you thought he was great after his first year when he was coach of the year and they go to the playoffs and win a playoff game, it doesn't feel right to me to have a complete about face, because I still think he's smart. I still think he's got a good personality, the right personality for this job. I still think he can lead the locker room. So I'm surprised that there's been such a reaction to Stefanski. And, I got guys texting me, they should fire him. I think that's ridiculous. I know he hasn't been as good, but I feel like he has the skill set to figure it out. I really do. And, you talk about, knee-jerk reactions and stability. Like, that thought would never enter my head. So, yes, he wasn't his best this year, but I have not lost complete confidence in Kevin Stefanski.
Wow. So
have you? Am I wrong on that?
No, I'm still debating it. And that's kind of why I wanted to ask you. I think I want to think about it a little bit more. I guess I debate whether I'm trying to figure out whether I think he should be calling the plays or not next year. Maybe if, everyone talks about how great Van Pelt is, right? I mean, what would you think about that? I mean,
yeah, I don't object to that idea, Chud. And at some point this season, I think it was a bye week. The offense had been struggling so much. It felt like a why not proposition. Why not shake it up? Why not see if you can spark something over the last 5 games? And obviously it didn't happen. Kevin Stefanski's resisted giving up the play calling, which I understand, but I would be open to that idea. Now, I don't think it would be night and day. They're calling the plays from the same game plan, right? From the same playbook. But if you wanted to shake it up, I understand that. And I think it would give Alex Van Pelt more reason to want to stay and be happy here because coordinators want to call plays. I don't expect that to happen. I think Stefanski thinks he's a good play caller and wants to do that. Again, you can't say he's been great as a play caller, and you can't say his system's been great this year. I'm not trying to make that argument, but I will say it's hard to be a play caller when your quarterback does not execute the plays you're calling. And I thought that happened way too often this season.
Yeah, and to go back to, you asked me what I thought, it would be a mistake to fire him. I'm not saying that. I mean, that would be, gosh, I can't even imagine trying to rebuild another coach after we've done it so many times. There's no question he should be back in my mind. And there's other things you got to think about too. I mean, and I know all the teams dealt with it, but the Browns got hit by COVID. You obviously had an injured quarterback. You just mentioned a quarterback that's not delivering, the execution. So there's a lot of things that go into play here. You mentioned earlier, the defense looked pretty good at times. For much of the year, the defense saved the day. So there's still some things to work on. That said, I think next year is a pivotal year. I mean, you can't have another season like this next year. If that's the case, then, now we're talking 2 out of 3 and, that's not good.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. I think it's really interesting. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I just think it's interesting that a year ago, right, when the Browns had lost forever, and we're talking coming off the disaster Freddie Kitchens year, if they had been 7-8 or whatever, they're 7-9 with a chance to finish 8-9, like that would have been looked at as an improvement, right? A step in the right direction. And I get it. I get what happened a year ago. I get that expectations were through the roof, and I think rightfully so. I just think it's hard to win in this league. I think sometimes there's a natural step back after a breakthrough year. The close games that you won the year before, you lose the next year. We're talking unless you're an established dynasty type of team with a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? The Patriots did not have the valleys. The Packers don't really have the valleys. The Steelers don't, right? They got Big Ben. Like, if you look at that, it's the teams that are great organizations with great quarterbacks. Everybody else in the league kind of ebbs and flows. So I'm not saying 7-9 or whatever the Browns are going to finish, right? I'm not saying that's acceptable. What I'm saying is they're in a better place than they were a couple of years ago. I do believe the front office is much more stable. I believe there's better cohesion in the building. I don't think it's as dysfunctional as it has been in the past when Freddie Kitchens would fly off the handle or Ray Farmer would text the sideline. Like, I don't get that vibe from the organization. Yes, they should have won more games, but I don't think there's any kind of blow up necessary. I think the foundation is pretty solid. Now it becomes about making sure you have the right quarterback, fixing the things that Kevin Stefanski struggled at this year, rounding out the roster, and then going and winning games in the fourth quarter, because those games were there to be won this year.
But Scott, you just hit it right on the head, though. That's the main thing. How many times, how many minutes in this podcast over the last year have we talked about quarterback? And that is the main thing in the NFL. If you have one, you win. If you don't, you don't. Right now, it appears they don't. Doesn't mean he can't be the guy. I don't know. We can talk more about the injuries and all that. But the bottom line is, and the guy brings on drama. And, it's just, you wonder if this contract situation, they don't give him the big deal. We talked about that a million times. Would maybe things be different had he had the big deal? I don't know. There's so many questions when it comes to Baker Mayfield. And the problem is, I don't know if we're any closer to an answer than we were earlier in the year, because, if the guy was healthy, let's be honest. That injury had to play a factor.
Yeah, I would never deny that it played a factor, Chud. It's all about how big a factor did it play. And should he have been able to overcome the injury, right?
Should
the injury is the injury.
Should the Browns have they just taken a step back and say, hey, you're just not ready to go. Let's have you sit. Did they mess this up?
I don't think so. And I know that's not a super common opinion, but I flashed back to Cincinnati, right? They win 41-16 in Cincinnati. He's dealing with the same thing in Cincinnati that he dealt with 3 weeks before and 4 weeks after. And yet he can complete all those passes, and we're not talking about him being injured. So it's only an issue when he struggles, right? And I get that. And again, I'm not saying it didn't affect some throws, and Van Pelt said it did. I get that. But he thought he was healthy enough to play. The doctors thought he was healthy enough to play. There's no reason he couldn't have overcome some of those things. And we're talking a matter of a couple of plays here and there, right? The left arm injury did not cause him to fumble on that screen pass, the ball to drop out of his hand on that screen pass in Baltimore that might have changed the game, right? I don't think the left arm, maybe it affected him on the throw to Landry in the Packers game, but I don't think it affected all 4 interceptions, right? It didn't affect in the second quarter when he's got 3rd and 3 and Peoples-Jones runs a hook and he's wide open right in front of him and Baker doesn't throw the ball. That's not a shoulder injury. So there's bigger issues at play here with Baker Mayfield. And that's not to mean that he can't get back to where he was a year ago. It doesn't mean that the shoulder didn't bother him to whatever degree. It just means I believe as long as he thought he was healthy enough, and he did, and the doctors said he did, then he should have been playing because he's your starting quarterback. He's your number 1 overall pick. And he and the team just were not able to get the job done, given whatever issues they had.
So if that's true and you're right, that's a problem then.
Yeah, that's a problem, Chud. And again, so the options are: do you bring back Baker, hope he's healthy, hope that makes a huge difference, hope another year in the system, improves his seeing the field and decision making, like Alex Van Pelt said it would when I asked him about it on Thursday. Do you try to find an upgrade? Is it easy to find an upgrade? Well, it's not going to be easy, but can you find an upgrade? Are X, Y, and Z guys even an upgrade, right? Does Baker want to be here? All these things are in play here. And I think the default position is Baker comes back as your starter next year because you're guaranteed to pay him $18.9 million. He's under contract, and it might be hard to go find a guy that is a better quarterback than Baker, right? So, I think that's kind of the default is, we'll run it back with Baker. But that doesn't mean Andrew Berry shouldn't be looking, which is a big difference from a year ago when he wouldn't have been looking because it felt like Baker was the guy. So I feel like this year changed that, right? And the fact that we're not talking about a long-term extension. Those are all because Baker wasn't good enough this year. And, people want to blame 80% of that on the shoulder. Who am I to argue? I don't put that much blame on it. But then there's a whole lot of pressure next year if he comes back healthy. That number 1, he better play a whole lot better. And number 2, he better stay healthy because, that's a key in this league. Guys play through injuries. Van Pelt said it yesterday that he thought Baker learned how important it is to play through injuries and be able to play well, right? That's something he learned this year. Well, that's a valuable lesson, but you got to go out and prove that you can do it. You can play hurt and still be able to win games.
Kind of like
Ben's
Aaron
done it
Rodgers.
forever.
Kind of like Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers, Ben, right? And it's tough because you compare Baker with these Hall of Fame guys. But that's what this league is, right? I mean, this league is the league is you want one of those guys. If not, then you're just trying to prop up your quarterback. And everything has to be right. Well, if everything has to be right, there's other guys you could probably win with. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where I feel like this season has me thinking about Baker. And now that doesn't mean he can't improve. And it's a year ago when I thought that he was borderline, he was playing at a borderline elite level, right? Where I was convinced he was the future. So, maybe it's hypocritical to say this, but it also feels like that was a smaller success sample size than some of the struggles we've seen Baker have throughout his career.
A lot of national media will tell you, Barry, Baker's not his guy.
Right, because he didn't draft him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a factor in this, right? I mean, if John Dorsey were the GM still, Baker would have been signed to a giant extension. Right now, he still might be getting killed for, not playing well or whatever, but that would be done. And the fact that he wasn't drafted by this organization, that he was up and down his first 3 years, gave the Browns enough pause to not sign him to that huge extension and not even make serious negotiations, right? I mean, that's a sign there too. It wasn't like they just couldn't agree on a deal. They never had serious discussions, which meant the Browns wanted to see more of Baker.
Well, we'll talk more about this next week, but remind me, next week we'll talk about the final records and predictions and being cautious next year because, obviously neither of us saw them going, 7-10 or 8-9, right? I mean, no one saw that, but the expectations, they were high. We'll discuss that next week. So let's move on to this week's game. It's unbelievable, kind of meaningless game. I mean, really, the AFC North, you thought it might come down to this final weekend, but the Bengals, that's the thing. Scott, it's amazing. The Bengals have found a way to win big games, and the Browns have not. To beat Kansas City like they did, and boy, Joe Burrow, it's like, got to be a little jealous of that.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, how good does he look, right? And he's got those three weapons. If this game meant something, we'd be talking about Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Higgins, Boyd, Joe Mixon. And, oh my gosh, the Browns have to face these guys for the next 5 years, right? Because they're all like 24 or 25. It's not been a discussion this week because who knows if any of those guys are going to play. We know Burrow is not. We know Mixon's not. But yeah, I mean, again, it shows the margin, the slim margin in this league, right? The Bengals could have lost to the Chiefs. They got 3rd and 31 or 3rd and 27 in the Chiefs blitz, and Burrow throws a great pass, and Chase gets it, and all of a sudden they win the game, right? And they need 2 penalties called in the end zone on 4th down to keep extending the game. So if they could have lost that game, and all of a sudden the Browns would have probably played with a lot more enthusiasm Monday night, right? We could be having a completely different discussion this week. That's just how the league works. But yes, the Bengals got it done versus them. They got it done versus the Ravens twice, right? So there's a lot to like about that Bengals team, certainly. And, I certainly, they would have been 4th on my list to win the North this year, but they win it. And they win it because their quarterback played like an MVP candidate.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously Lamar and the Ravens taking a step back. I think that, do you think if Lamar stays healthy and, the Ravens lost a lot of close games there with some questionable, whether it was right or wrong decisions. I mean, they kind of played themselves out of it.
Yeah, they did. They went for 2 those couple of times, right? I think with the Ravens, the injuries just caught up to them. And not just the Lamar injury, right? Just all the defensive injuries.
True.
But losing Lamar, I mean, they lost him in that Browns game December 12th, right? You lose him for the last month of the year. I mean, he's a he's a huge difference maker, right? Obviously.
Yep.
So I think it would have been interesting. I think, if you give the Ravens even one more win, then the Cincinnati have to win this week or whatever. But I think Cincinnati was probably the best team in the division this year. Their quarterback is certainly playing the best of the quarterbacks in the division this year. And I'm still impressed that Baltimore, Pittsburgh hung around as long as they did, giving what the injuries and the talent deficiencies, and we've talked about it, that speaks to the organizational strength, which the Browns probably haven't built up yet, right? They don't have that foundation and tradition of we're going to win regardless. So when things start to go sideways, it's tougher to correct.
You got anything you want to hit on before we get to predictions and wrap this puppy up?
Yeah, I did want to talk about Doug Dieken real quick, Chud.
Oh gosh,
right?
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yes. I mean, I want to get your story. You worked with him. You've been around him a ton. Just first of all, 51 years with the organization is remarkable. Didn't miss a game at left tackle. Has missed 2 as a radio broadcaster since 1984. Yep. Unbelievable. Good dude to be around. Funny. If you run into him at a watering hole on the west side, he'll probably buy you a beer. It's happened to me before. All of a sudden, a beer shows up in front of me, and it's Dieken. It's some booth somewhere. I'm not even seeing him. I enjoyed talking football with him. If you had offensive line questions, he was an incredible resource, right? Because that's a tough position for the layman to figure out. He was always great at it. He went to Illinois. I went to Northwestern, so we traded barbs about that many times. Just a good guy to talk to, good guy to be around. I think the fans picked up on that, right? I mean, he's been here for 50 years. So it's a loss. And I don't know who the Browns are going to put in there, but they're going to be giant shoes to fill next to Jimmy in that radio booth.
Oh, my gosh. Huge shoes. Cleveland, you say Doug Dieken and you just say Cleveland. And, man, I'm going to miss him. Yeah, I've worked with him for a long time, in the sports department at Channel 3. Interviewed him a million times, talked to him in the office a million times, and the watering holes a bunch of times, especially at close quarters, Scott.
There you go.
My favorite place in Avon Lake. My wife and I love it there. We've been going there. I've been going there for decades, but close quarters is one of his favorite spots. And he has, his spot right there by the door. And, there's a picture of Deke. There's a bunch of pictures of him in there in close quarters, but he's a regular in there. And he would do the same thing. You get a beer and it would be Doug, and had many good talks with him, over a soda. And a lot of good stories from him, a lot of good memories. And you just, he was that comfortable voice on the radio. When you have the game on, you know what you're going to get. And, on TV, did the point after all those years with Jimmy and Tony Grossi, right, and Sam Rutigliano. Those were some epic shows, man, back in the day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Deke, man. And the best part about it is he's just a funny guy, man. He always does a quick one-liner. Yep. And his storytelling is incredible, man. He would tell you stories about the past, whether it was football or just in life in general. So yeah, he's definitely, it's a big loss for Cleveland. And the stamina, like you said, I mean, not to miss all the time and just accountability, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Doug Dieken accountability. So I'm glad you brought that up.
It's funny. I remember it wasn't that long ago, maybe 3 years ago. We were still in the building, so pre-COVID, but it's late on a Sunday night. I'm in bed watching like Big Chuck and Little John, right? Just flipping through one of the old ones. And Dieken shows up in it. And he does like these funny acting things. And I almost fell out of bed looking. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was giving him crap the next day. He said he got a kick out of it. So multi-talented fella.
And he could take a joke too, all the holding penalty jokes. And,
yep.
Just a West Side guy. I'm a West Side guy. And, it's, man, yeah, it's sad to see, no doubt. And, it'll be interesting to see, what they do to replace him. But Jimmy said on the air, it's going to be weird to, look to his side and not have Deke there anymore. That's going to be very weird for Jimmy, no doubt about it.
No kidding.
All right. Anything else before? So
No.
next week, let's break down expectations, the final game, drama. Because unfortunately that's lurking back in, and that seems to be an issue with the Browns, no question. So we'll hit that next week. But anything else before we get to prediction time? Kind of a lame prediction, really.
Yeah, no, we should have a wrap up with Kevin Stefanski, a wrap up with Andrew Berry. So there'll be plenty to talk about next week. Maybe even for the next couple of weeks, just to kind of wrap up, what, was a newsworthy season, but a disappointing season. So, no, that's all I got. Yeah, we could do real quick predictions. Chud, I'm going to go. I think Case Keenum is better than Brandon Allen. I think Keenum is motivated to play even if nobody else is. I got the Browns 20-14.
20-14. Okay. So are the Browns favored by 6? Did I see that right?
Yeah, that's the last line I saw. So, yeah, I guess I'm right on the number. I should probably mix it up.
That's incredible. Wow. Wow. Okay, so you're going Browns.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Bengals 20-17. I just think that even though they're resting guys, they're still motivated to play. I didn't see any motivation. Not any motivation. You made a great point with the defense. I have no idea what we're going to get out of the Browns running game. Who knows how the offensive line is going to be. I just, the Bengals still want to take a little bit of but momentum into the playoffs. They have I guess they don't care about the seeding. They're pretty much content where they're at, right? Because they're resting all their guys.
I think so, yeah. I don't know if it could change a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, can't. They would need like the Titans and Chiefs to both lose or something to move. So, yeah, there's not much there. I guess I'm trying to talk myself into picking the Browns, but for now, I'm going to go 2017 Bengals.
Okay. I can see that. Who knows, right? We don't know how much Nick Chubb's going to play. We don't know if
right.
There's just too many question marks on both sides of the ball. But I've talked to Case Keenum. We talked to Case Keenum this week, and he's going to do what he can to win. And Stefanski's going to coach like he's trying to win. But again, who knows if that matters? The weather could be ugly. It's a crapshoot. I would not bet this game for any of the teams out there.
No, and I have this could go either way. And then Case had that generic bite about, it's a dream come true for any kid to want to play in the NFL. Listen, he can say what he wants about this game.
I do really think that his excitement is genuine, right? He didn't get to play he got to start one game in the last 2 years. So
no, that's true.
Right. He'll be excited to play, but that doesn't mean there's going to be energy throughout the team,
Right. Well, that's the question too. How much energy will be in the building?
Right.
So we'll see from there. But could go either way, no doubt. Well, I guess so. We both got it wrong last week. So I think I'm 10-6 and you're 9-7.
No, well, maybe I can force a tie in this last
That's
week.
right.
Yeah.
That makes it
for
more
the
fun.
season.
Yep.
So, hey, I appreciate you squeezing this in. I know it was a busy week for you, Chud, and we'll regroup next week and talk about the season that was, because we're not done talking about the Browns. There's always something to talk about.
Always something, 24/7, 365 days a year.
Tell me about it. That's my life.
They don't even take Christmas off, Scott.
I know. Yeah. You don't have to tell me, Chud. So, thank you, Dave Chudowsky. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. You can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.